Let me tell you something, people. In all my years on the bench, and believe me, I've seen some truly unbelievable things. There are moments that burn themselves into your memory forever. Moments so outrageous, so shockingly disrespectful, that even I have to pause and think, did that really just happen? This. This was one of those moments. The courtroom didn't know it yet, but they were seconds away from witnessing something that would spread across the internet like wildfire. A moment so disrespectful, so shockingly arrogant, that even my longtime viewers would replay it over and over in disbelief. And how did it begin? With a laugh, not a normal laugh, not a nervous chuckle. No, 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 this was a sharp, mocking, mean-spirited laugh. The kind that comes from a young woman who genuinely believes the world bends around her feet. Her name? Belle Davenport, 22 years old. The daughter of Congressman Thomas Davenport, a man whose power in Washington had apparently protected her from consequences her entire life. And now? Now, with the entitlement of someone who had never heard the word no, she thought she could bring that same arrogance into my courtroom. Oh, honey, you picked the wrong room. Let me paint you a picture. The cameras captured the exact moment. Her lips curled, her chin tilted upward, and that dismissive scoff slipped out as she looked me dead in the eye. The arrogance in that laugh, it was almost physical. A slap across the face of the courtroom. A challenge. A declaration that she believed she was above the law, above the judge, above everyone. I watched as audience members stiffened, the air tightened, even my bailiff shifted forward instinctively, sensing what was about to unfold. It was the kind of laugh that didn't just disrespect me, it dared me to react. Now, Belle strutted into my courtroom earlier that morning with the confidence of a celebrity arriving on a red carpet. Her designer heels clicked across the floor, her diamond bracelet sparkled under the lights, and get this. 2 personal assistants trailed behind her, carrying files she probably never opened. She paused, before taking her seat, flipping her silky hair over one shoulder, scanning the room with the cold, bored eyes of someone accustomed to luxury lounges, not courtrooms. The entitlement? It radiated off her like perfume. Strong, overwhelming, and impossible to ignore. And before the case even began, she whispered loudly to her friend, fully aware cameras were rolling. This should be quick. I mean, it's TV court. How serious can it be? How serious can it be? You want to know what I did? I didn't react, not yet. I was scanning the paperwork, already noticing inconsistencies, already seeing the lies she didn't even know she had exposed. But I didn't show it, not yet. You see, I had one advantage Belle didn't understand. I've faced thousands of entitled people, thousands of liars, thousands of manipulative personalities who thought they could outsmart me. I have a sixth sense for deception, people, and everything about this girl's demeanor was ringing alarms. Now, the case on the surface seemed simple. A car accident between Belle and a local school teacher named Elena Ruiz. Elena, a soft-spoken woman in her early 30s, walked into my courtroom clutching a thin folder of documents with trembling hands. Everything about her, the quiet voice, the modest clothing, the careful posture contrasted sharply against Belle's polished arrogance. And let me tell you something, that contrast? It would soon become the fuel for one of the most explosive rulings I have ever delivered. When my bailiff announced the case, Belle barely looked up from her phone. She smirked, crossed her legs, and leaned back lazily as if this courtroom existed solely for her entertainment. Meanwhile, Elena stood nervously at her podium, clearing her throat before beginning her testimony. She explained the details. Belle had sped through a stop sign, hit her car, left her with injuries and thousands in repair costs, and then refused to give insurance information. But before Elena could even finish her sentence, Belle rolled her eyes dramatically. A theatrical roll so big the audience gasped. I lifted my gaze slightly, observing, calculating. Oh, I knew this type. I'd dealt with this type for 25 years. I had built a career dismantling this type. And Belle Davenport was about to learn exactly who she was dealing with. But the moment everything changed, the moment that shifted the entire direction of this case, came when I asked my first question. Simple, calm, direct. Miss Davenport, were you speeding? A normal judicial question. A standard opening. But Belle? She reacted like I'd asked her if she knew how to breathe. She laughed. She actually laughed. A mocking scoff dripping with condescension followed by, "Are you serious? Do you even know how to measure speed?" The courtroom froze. Heads turned. Mouths opened. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, unsure whether they had somehow captured a moment too outrageous to be real. That laugh, it told the room everything. It told them she didn't respect me. It told them she didn't respect the legal process. It told them she didn't think she could ever face real consequences. And worst of all, it told them she expected to win simply because of her last name. But here's what Belle didn't know, what she couldn't have known. I had already completed my pre-case review. I had already caught her inconsistencies. I had already noted the contradictions between her statements and the evidence. I had already prepared for the moment I would confront the lies. But that laugh changed everything. Because that was the moment I decided this case wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about a car accident. This was about accountability, something Belle Davenport had never been forced to face. And now, for the first time in her privileged little life, she was about to meet the one person she couldn't manipulate, couldn't intimidate, and couldn't charm. Me. And I wasn't just prepared, people, I was ready. If that first part was the spark, what came next? That's where the fire began to spread. Slowly at first, then consuming everything in its path, because once Belle Davenport laughed in my face, the entire tone of my courtroom shifted. The energy tightened. The audience leaned forward. Even my bailiff seemed to brace himself. Everyone but Belle understood one universal truth. When you disrespect Judge Judy, you don't walk away unscathed. And when you do it while the cameras are rolling, you don't walk away at all. But Belle, she didn't feel the tension. She didn't recognize the change. She had lived her entire life in a bubble of power, privilege, and political immunity. She believed consequences were for other people, people without her last name, people without her father's connections, people without the luxury of arrogance. So when I asked her a second question, the kind any normal person would answer respectfully, Belle responded the same way she responded to waiters, teachers, and anyone she considered beneath her, with a smile. A slow, smug, dismissive smile that curled at the edges like she was amused by the entire proceeding. I kept my voice neutral, dangerously neutral. Were you, or were you not, driving 15 miles over the speed limit? And instead of answering, she glanced at her assistant, smirked, and said loudly enough for microphones to pick up, "Should I explain basic math to her?" The gallery erupted. Not in sound, but in stunned silence. That kind of silence that vibrates. That silence that says she has no idea what she just did. Elena Ruiz, the soft-spoken schoolteacher standing on the opposite podium, looked down at her hands, visibly shaking. She wasn't afraid of Belle. She wasn't afraid of the courtroom. She was afraid that once again, the wealthy and well-connected would get away with hurting the helpless. Let me tell you about Elena Ruiz. She had never been in trouble a day in her life. She'd worked since she was 16, tutoring kids after school, caring for her mother, volunteering at shelters. When Belle's speeding car slammed into her driver's side door 3 months ago, she'd been on her way home from tutoring a student. The accident left her with a sprained shoulder, medical debt, and a car she couldn't afford to repair. And Belle? Belle had driven off before Elena even finished calling the police. And when Elena finally tracked down Belle's insurance information, the insurance company declined the claim. Why? Because Belle told them, "Are you ready for this?" Elena threw herself into traffic. This was the kind of person Belle Davenport was. Someone who didn't just lie, she fabricated fantasies so absurd, she expected others to accept them as truth. But the most disturbing part? She believed she could use her father's influence to bury Elena's claim entirely. And up until that morning, she was almost right. But this wasn't a local officer she could charm. This wasn't a clerk she could intimidate. This wasn't a system she could bully. This was my courtroom. And I am not intimidated by Congressman. Belle crossed her arms, leaned back, and with a bored sigh said, Your Honor, let me put this simply. My car barely tapped hers. Her reaction was dramatic, like Oscar-worthy. I don't know why she's so emotional about it. Emotional. That word, especially said with that sarcastic tone, hit me like a direct shot. My head tilted slightly, my eyes narrowed, my posture sharpened. It was tiny, subtle, but everyone who had ever watched me knew what it meant. Someone was about to get verbally dismembered. Belle, oblivious, twirled a strand of hair around her finger. I spoke slowly, icily, every syllable precise. Miss Davenport, is that your final answer on record? She shrugged. Shrugged like the question didn't matter. Like the entire case didn't matter. Like Elena's suffering didn't matter. Then she delivered the line that would ignite the courtroom. I mean, does it matter? Nothing's going to happen here. I'm not the one who's going to cry later. Now even the audience reacted. A ripple of whispers, a gasp on the left, a muttered, "Oh my God," from the back row. But I didn't react with anger. Not yet. Instead, I asked calmly, Miss Davenport, why did you tell your insurance company that Miss Ruiz threw herself in front of your car? The color in Belle's face drained. Just slightly a crack in the mask, a slip she didn't intend to reveal. But her arrogance was too strong to let her retreat. So she lifted her chin and said, because she was blocking the intersection and I assumed she'd step back. People like her get overwhelmed easily. People like her, 2 words that changed everything. The courtroom felt it. I felt it. Elena felt it most of all. Those 2 words revealed the truth, the entitlement, the disdain, the superiority complex Belle tried so hard to disguise as confidence. I leaned back slowly, my voice soft but edged with steel. Miss Davenport, kindly explain what you mean by people like her, for the first time since entering my courtroom? Belle hesitated. Just a flicker, but that was enough, because I never miss hesitation. Hesitation means fear. Fear means guilt. Guilt means lies. And lies mean I'm about to dig deeper. This was no longer a simple case. This was about character, pattern, behavior, accountability. And I had only just begun the excavation. The moment Belle hesitated, everything in my courtroom shifted. It was subtle, a tightening in the air, a stillness that settled over the benches. My longtime viewers know this energy well. It's the atmosphere that appears right before I deliver one of my legendary takedowns. The kind that ends careers, shatters egos, and goes viral before the episode even finishes airing. Belle Davenport, however, was the only one who didn't sense the danger closing in around her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lean forward aggressively. I didn't scold, threaten, or warn. Instead, I did something far more terrifying. I became calm, ice cold, calm. Miss Davenport, I repeated, my voice soft but surgical. Please explain what you meant by people like her. The courtroom waited. The cameras zoomed in. Elena clasped her trembling hands together. Even my bailiff, who had probably heard thousands of excuses, angled his stance slightly forward. Belle crossed her legs, adjusted her blazer, and attempted to recover her earlier composure. I mean, she said dismissively, she's emotional. You know how some people are, sensitive, overly dramatic, not used to stressful situations. I didn't blink. Miss Ruiz, were you blocking the intersection? Elena shook her head quickly. No, Your Honor, I was already driving through when she ran the sign. I turned back to Belle, and you consider that dramatic? Belle gave a small, mocking laugh. Your Honor, she's clearly exaggerating. Look at her. She looks like the type who would faint if someone honked at her, the courtroom murmured. The audacity was unbelievable. My eyes narrowed not in anger, but in analysis. I flipped through the paperwork again, stopping at a page Belle had assumed nobody would examine closely, a page she had hoped would blend into the stack of documents her assistant had sloppily put together. But I am not just any judge. I can spot inconsistencies faster than most people can read the first sentence. Miss Davenport, I said slowly, you stated in your written report that you were driving 35 miles per hour. Yes, Belle snapped, because I was. I turned the page with a precision that felt almost theatrical. And yet, I continued, the officer's report states you were going 51. The courtroom inhaled sharply. Belle froze. She hadn't expected me to have the police report. She hadn't expected anyone to dig deeper. After all, she'd been taught her whole life that paperwork was a formality, that truth didn't matter as much as confidence. I don't recall that, Belle stammered. I'm sure you don't, I replied sharply, but the officer recalls it very clearly, for the first time. Belle's polished demeanor cracked. I flipped to another section of the file. And here, I said, tapping the page, you wrote that you attempted to exchange insurance information, but Miss Ruiz refused to communicate. Belle nodded quickly, too quickly. Yes. Exactly. Interesting, I replied, because Miss Ruiz provided this. Elena, with shaking hands, handed over a crumpled envelope. Inside was a printed screenshot, a message Belle had sent 2 hours after the crash. I read it aloud. My father will handle this. Don't contact me again unless you want legal trouble. The courtroom gasped. Belle's face went white. My lips tightened, not in anger, but in disbelief. You threatened her. My voice was razor thin. Belle lifted her chin stubbornly. I wasn't threatening. I was being clear. Clear. I repeated flatly. You told the victim of a car accident not to contact you. You refused to exchange insurance information. You fled the scene. And then you lied about it in your report. Belle rolled her eyes. A fatal mistake. I didn't flee, she muttered. I had somewhere important to be. My eyebrows rose. More important than giving insurance information. Belle made a scoffing sound. It was a charity gala. My father was giving a speech. Hundreds of people were waiting. I wasn't going to be late because some random driver. She stopped. Too late. I leaned forward. Miss Ruiz is not some random driver. She is the person you hit. Belle shrugged. It was barely a tap. I turned to the photos of Elena's car. Crushed door, deep impact, shattered glass. A tap. I repeated, holding up the evidence. Does this look like a tap to you? Silence. Belle's eyes darted. For the first time, uncertainty flickered behind her arrogance. But still. She reached for her old shield. Entitlement. My father, she began. I slammed the file shut. Not violently, not loudly, but with a controlled finality that sent chills down the courtroom. I don't care who your father is. The room froze. I continued, each word sharper than the last. You are in my courtroom. And here, Miss Davenport, titles, connections, and last names do not replace truth. Belle swallowed hard. She had never been spoken to like that in her life. Not by teachers, not by administrators, not by police, not by anyone. I scanned the file again. Miss Ruiz, I said gently, please tell the court what happened after she struck your vehicle. Elena's voice quivered. She laughed. She drove away laughing. The courtroom erupted. Gasps. Whispers. Disbelief. I turned slowly, deliberately toward Belle, my gaze. Lethal. You left the scene of an accident, laughing. Belle tried to recover, fumbling her words. I wasn't laughing at her. I was laughing because WH. Even she couldn't justify it. I folded my hands. This, I said quietly, is beginning to look less like carelessness and more like character. That was it. The pivot. The shift. This case was no longer about property damage. It was about who Belle was and what she believed she could get away with. And I had only just begun dismantling her. By the time I finished exposing the contradictions in Belle's statements, the courtroom was no longer watching a simple case. They were watching a dismantling in progress. Surgical, methodical, devastating. A dismantling of privilege, arrogance, and entitlement. And the more I uncovered, the more it became clear that Belle Davenport wasn't just careless, she wasn't just rude, she was dangerous. I slid a new document across my desk with a precision that made the audience lean forward in anticipation. Miss Davenport, I began, you claimed the damage to Miss Ruiz's car was minimal, correct? Yes, Belle snapped, because it was. She's being dramatic to make money. I turned to Elena. Miss Ruiz, what was the cost of your repairs? Elena swallowed hard. 7 for 1.6, Your Honor. Belle burst into laughter. Loud, mocking, echoing across the courtroom. 7,000 美元, she repeated loudly, for that car. Please. The car isn't even worth that much. She's trying to scam me, the audience gasped. I didn't blink. Miss Davenport, I said calmly, the repair estimate is not based on the car's value. It is based on the damage you caused. Belle waved her hand dismissively. Whatever. Her car was old. It probably fell apart when I breathed on it. The arrogance was unbelievable. But what came next? That was worse. I pulled out a printed photo, high resolution, zoomed in, time-stamped. I held it up. Miss Davenport, is this your vehicle? Belle tilted her head, obviously. And is this the dent on your front bumper? Yes. And does this time-stamp reflect the day of the accident? Yes. I flipped to another photo, this time of Elena's crushed driver's side door. And these two damages, I continued, align perfectly in size, shape, height, and angle of impact. Belle shrugged. My voice hardened. So, would you like to try again with the lie that you barely tapped her? The room went dead still. For a split second, Belle's mask slipped. Panic flickered in her eyes. But entitlement was a powerful drug, and she forced her expression back into arrogance. I didn't hit her that hard, she insisted, her voice rising. She must have exaggerated it later. I leaned back, dangerously calm, the kind of calm that meant a storm was about to hit. Miss Davenport, do you know how hard a vehicle has to strike a driver's side door to bend the metal inward like this? Belle rolled her eyes. No, because I'm not a mechanic, correct. I replied sharply, but you are the person who caused it. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. And then came the next blow. I lifted a document with a bright red clip, the kind of clip used only when something explosive was inside. Miss Davenport, I said, you submitted a written statement claiming you were driving home from a charity event at the time of the collision. Yes, Belle said confidently, almost smugly. I lifted another document. One problem, Belle's smirk faded, just slightly. This is the guest list from the charity gala, I said. Your name is not on it. Belle blinked twice. The first visible sign of panic. My father, she began. Your father, I cut in, did not attend this event either. The audience erupted in whispers. I continued. This is a log of entries at the gala security checkpoint. Your car was never scanned in. You were never there. Silence. Total, crushing silence. And then I delivered the hammer. Miss Davenport, where were you that night? Belle froze. Her lips parted. No words came out. I pressed again. Where were you? Belle's jaw tightened. That's private. My eyebrows rose. Not when you lie to a court. Not when you lie in a legal document. Not when your lie is used to cover up reckless conduct that injured another person. Belle's composure shattered. I was at a party, okay? She snapped. A private one. My father didn't want the press to know where I was. There it was. The truth she never intended to reveal. My voice turned cold enough to freeze the room. So, instead of admitting you were at an unsanctioned party one police described as unsafe, underage, and alcohol-heavy, you fabricated a charity event to make yourself look responsible. And then you used that lie to discredit an innocent woman you injured. Belle's face went crimson. But she couldn't stop herself. You don't understand? She hissed. I can't have that on record. It'll make my father look bad. I slammed the file shut. Your father isn't on trial here. You are. Belle's voice cracked. He won't be happy about this. I leaned forward, each word a dagger. Miss Davenport, your father's political power does not extend into my courtroom. He cannot protect you from your own behavior. And frankly, I don't care what he thinks. Then, the final blow. I opened yet another document, one no one expected. A traffic violation, issued 2 months before the accident. Speeding, running a stop sign, reckless driving. All 3. Miss Davenport, I said, you have been cited for dangerous driving 3 times this year alone. Belle swallowed hard. And now, I continued, you have caused an accident, lied to your insurance, falsified your statement, and attempted to intimidate the victim, all while laughing about it. The courtroom was silent. Everyone felt it. Everyone knew. They were seconds away from the explosion. Because I was no longer irritated, I was furious. The courtroom wasn't breathing anymore. It wasn't reacting. It wasn't blinking. Every single person sat frozen, absorbing the magnitude of what I had just exposed. Belle Davenport, the daughter of one of the most powerful congressmen in the state, had just been peeled open, layer by layer, every lie stripped bare, every privilege shattered, every shield torn away. And now, all that remained was the reckoning. I slid the final document into place and folded my hands, that posture, that stillness, the same posture that had preceded every legendary takedown in my 3 decades of terrifying case history. The audience recognized it instantly. This was the moment I end people. Miss Davenport, I began, voice low but vibrating with controlled fury. This is not just about a car accident. I paused. This is about your pattern of behavior. Your entitlement, your disregard for the truth, and your belief that your father's influence excuses your recklessness. Belle's throat worked as she swallowed, her confidence draining like water through cracked stone. You lied in your written statement, I continued. You lied in your testimony. You attempted to intimidate the plaintiff, and you openly mocked this court. I paused, then said softly, you laughed. A wave of shame washed over the courtroom. It was impossible to forget the sound of Belle's mocking laugh the moment she believed she had already won. I leaned forward. Let me make something very clear. This courtroom does not bend to political power. It does not bend to wealth. And it certainly does not bend to brattiness. The audience erupted into quiet murmurs. Elena pressed a hand over her mouth. Belle's face was bright red, but her jaw remained defiantly clenched. I lifted the photos again. The crushed door, the matching bumper imprint, the time stamp, the documents, the falsified alibi, the reckless driving record. Miss Davenport, I said, I am about to give you something your father has clearly never given you, a deadly pause, a consequence. The entire courtroom vibrated in anticipation. I turned to Elena Ruiz. Miss Ruiz, you presented clear, credible, and consistent evidence. You have suffered financial harm, emotional distress, and intimidation attempts that no innocent person should endure. You have handled yourself with poise. You have told the truth, and this court believes you. Elena's eyes filled with tears. Then I shifted my gaze slowly, deliberately toward Belle. As for you, silence. Tension. Electricity. Your arrogance has dug a very deep hole. Belle finally cracked. I didn't mean, she began. I cut her off with a single raised hand. No, you meant every word. And now? You're going to hear mine? I lifted the judgment file. Miss Ruiz will be awarded the full $7,416 for her car repairs. Belle's jaw dropped. And, I continued, because of your deliberate dishonesty, you will also pay an additional $3,500 in punitive damages. WHAT. Belle screeched. That's insane. You can't do. I slammed the file shut. Be quiet. The force of my voice shook the room. This is my courtroom, Miss Davenport. I don't tolerate lies. I don't tolerate disrespect. And I don't tolerate privileged children who think they can treat the real world like their father's playground. Belle froze, speechless. But I wasn't finished. You will also pay Miss Ruiz's towing fees, the rental car cost for the duration of her repairs, and the court's administrative fee. Belle choked. How much is it? Brings your total judgment, I replied coldly, to $13,982. The number hit Belle like a punch to the chest. No. My dad, he's not going to. He won't pay that. I kept my gaze locked on her. Good. Maybe that will finally teach you accountability. Because your father cannot fix this for you. He cannot erase this. And he cannot protect you from the consequences of your own arrogance. Belle's face crumpled, but I still wasn't done. I turned to my bailiff officer. Before Miss Davenport leaves this courtroom, escort her to the clerk's office to sign the compliance order. I want her payment arrangements documented today. The bailiff nodded. The audience buzzed. Belle looked like she was standing on sinking ground. But I said suddenly, there is one more matter. The room froze again. Miss Davenport, when you laughed in this courtroom, you revealed exactly who you are. You are not sorry. You are not remorseful. You are not a victim. You are simply a young woman who has been protected from reality for too long. I stood. A rare move, one that signaled something catastrophic was about to happen. I am referring this case, I said, to the state's Traffic Enforcement Division for review of your license. They will determine whether you are fit to continue driving. The audience gasped. Elena covered her mouth. Belle went pale. You're taking my license. Belle cried. You can't do that. My dad will. I cut her off. Your father, I said sharply, is irrelevant here. He does not control the law. He does not control this courtroom. And frankly, I don't care what he thinks. Then, the final blow. Your reckless behavior could have killed someone. And until you learn responsibility, you should not be behind the wheel of any vehicle. Belle broke. Right there, in front of the cameras, in front of the crowd, in front of millions of future viewers. She burst into tears, sobbing uncontrollably, mascara streaking down her cheeks. I signaled the gavel. Judgment for the plaintiff. Court is adjourned. Bang! The sound echoed like thunder. The courtroom didn't just witness justice that day, they witnessed transformation. They witnessed collapse. They witnessed accountability delivered with surgical precision. As my bailiff escorted Belle out crying, shaking, her world imploding, I gathered my files with calm, absolute authority. The daughter of a congressman had walked into my courtroom untouchable. She walked out, exposed, humbled, and broken. And the internet? The internet would do the rest. Let me tell you something, people. Nobody, and I mean nobody, walks into my courtroom thinking they're above the law and walks out the same way they came in. That is what accountability looks like. That is what justice sounds like. And that is why I do what I do. Case closed.